This is Graham Lenihan. The clue's in the title. On the off chance you're not familiar with him, he is an accomplished comedy writer, script writer. In recent years he's become famous for something else, that is speaking out against the insanity of gender ideology and the mutilation of vulnerable young girls, not to mention the invasion of women's spaces by dudes in dresses. In September last year he was arrested at Heathrow Airport by armed police over something he posted on social media. Graham is an Irishman and he lives in currently Arizona. As far as I know, he hasn't renounced his Irish citizenship, but whether or not he has, he was arrested for something he published out of the jurisdiction, something which was quite innocuous. The Metropolitan Police made fools of themselves because he's such a high profile individual, and because of the furore this caused, they've settled with him for £25,000. I actually met Graham. I met him at one of Kelly's meetings. I suppose you call it a protest or a picket at the BBC. Nice guy. He's about 11 years younger than me, but he's not in good health. He has a heart condition. All that aside, who's paying him? This is someone else who's suffered police harassment, this time from Essex Police. Alison Pearson is talking about suing them. If she does and wins, who will pay? The answer is you, the taxpayer. The police won't pay anything. Is there a way to remedy this? Yes, there is. This is something I wrote in November 2018. Earlier that year, I read a report that the Crown Prosecution Service had been fined £200,000 in 2015 for losing what was called highly sensitive information. Bear with me, this is relevant. In 2018 it received a fine of £325,000 for similar data breach. I was curious about who would pay these fines, so I emailed the Information Commissioner and was ignored. My 2 follow-up emails were ignored. Eventually I contacted the man at the top of the tree and received a response. The fine would be paid to the Consolidated Fund. In other words, the government would transfer money from its left pocket to its right. Now again, bear with me. In July 2005, John Charles de Menezes was shot dead in London by a police officer. A full discussion of this shooting would take us far afield, but it was a tragic case of mistaken identity. Rather than charge the officers concerned or anyone else with murder, manslaughter or any crime for which they could be held personally culpable, it was decided that the Metropolitan Police should be prosecuted under health and safety regulations. I kid you not. It was convicted and fined, and again money was transferred by the government from its left pocket to its right. A lot of money was generated for lawyers, and police officers who could have been doing something useful sat around for days waiting to perjure themselves in court. And this came about because of liability laws, qualified immunity. Again, this is a long story, but it really began in the 19th century with Parliament legislating against, attempting to prevent accidents or to encourage employers to stop accidents. In 1844, Parliament passed the Further Factories Act, which in effect was the first health and safety act in Britain. All dangerous machinery was to be securely fenced off, and failure to do so regarded as a criminal offence. No child or young person was to clean mill machinery while it was in motion. The Act limited the hours worked by children to 6.5, with 3 hours schooling, and set a maximum of 12-hour day for young people between 13 and 18. The 12-hour rule also applied to women. That's what the far left call white privilege. This was the beginning of that strict liability. Then you had vicarious liability, which was really the same thing. How can I explain this? Factory owners would be liable for any breaches of this legislation, any accidents and deaths personally. This was a good thing because it stopped, or at least drastically reduced, injuries and deaths. If now you work in a factory, or perhaps a local butcher or baker or whatever, machinery has guards on it. You know, there's health and safety legislation. There have to be toilet facilities and cleaning, etc. Now, when it comes to the police and the government, liability is shifted onto the state. So, if you're beaten up by the police, unless there's a criminal prosecution, very seldom, or if they overstep the mark in some other way, your recourse is to sue the police, and if you win, the government will pay. In other words, the taxpayer. The way to stop this, and I suggest this in my 2018 piece, I'll put a link to it, but I've suggested this a long time before that. The way to stop this is to make the police personally liable, to strip them of qualified immunity when it comes to nonsense like this. So, Graham Lenihan, Alison Pearson should be able to sue, well, should have in his case, should be able to sue the individual officers concerned, and the bill should be paid by the police pension fund or the police union, or both. That basic reform would stop all this nonsense, and if you applied it to other branches of government as well, making unions and pension funds liable rather than the state, i.e. the taxpayer, it would be much better for all of us. Anyway, that's all I have to say.